Tech Talk series that we started a few months ago. And again, this is a series where we spotlight entrepreneurs from the diaspora who are living in many different countries. We've taken a tour of the world, literally. We were in Australia, South Africa, Dubai, India, UK, and now finally we've landed in the home of startups, the Bay Area. So welcome to all. Again, we'll be on live on LinkedIn and Twitter and other channels as well. And if you're on those channels, please pop in your questions there. We'll be monitoring all our different sites and asking questions from what we've gathered. Also, if you're on the Zoom channel itself here, you can put that in the question and answer box or the chat box, and we'll get to them. So just brief on Indiaspora. We are a 12-year-old nonprofit that's a network and a platform for diaspora leaders to convene and be a force for good. So we work on philanthropy quite a bit, mentoring young startups and young entrepreneurs, globally connecting the diaspora, and do many different activities. This week, for example, tomorrow, we have an AI summit. It's a physical event that'll take place at the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley itself. And we have future programming coming up. October 25th, we'll be in Boston for the Indiaspora Philanthropy Forum for people who are interested in either contributing to philanthropy or NGOs. And from the NGO community, we'll be there. And many other virtual events and physical events coming across the globe, since we're members in Canada, UK, Singapore, UAE, Australia, and India as well. So today we're joined by a global audience. So I want to welcome everyone to our show here. Tonight, we're featuring three amazing young entrepreneurs, and I'm going to have them come up on screen at the same time, if you can admit them. We have Kedar, who is calling in from Kansas City, Sahas, who's here in the Bay Area, and Shivani as well, who's a young entrepreneur here from the Bay Area too. So we have three amazing entrepreneurs. Welcome to you all. So we're going to hear some amazing stories. So I'm not going to give any introduction to any of the three participants. We're going to have them tell you their stories, where they were born, where they grew up, what education they had, how they came to be entrepreneurs. And I want to first start with Kedar. Hello, Kedar.
Hey, yeah, I'm Kedar. I don't know where to start with my story. I suppose my parents moved to the US in the mid 80s for graduate school. I was born in Boston, so I'm a US citizen. We lived in Bermuda for a handful of years, which was pretty cool as a young kid, just living on an island. And then for the most part, I grew up on the East Coast in North Carolina. And I went to college there at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, studied anthropology and biology. So sort of learned a bit about human culture, human dynamics, if you will, and then studied microbiology, went to get my PhD in Houston at the University of Houston, where I studied.
Can we mute, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Kedar.
Yeah, I studied evolutionary biology. So I spent a bunch of time writing code to sort of simulate the evolution of populations and population genetics. And then a bit of wet lab experiment, like doing genetic engineering. During that time, I ran a nonprofit organization which helped physicians, scientists, and engineers get sort of the soft skills and business skills to go work for startups, start their own companies, work in corporations as opposed to staying in academia. And through all of that, ended up at a venture capital firm on their data and AI strategy team, worked for their portfolio companies, sort of on a fractional ad hoc basis around any data AI needs. And this was early AI, like 2018, 2019.
Okay. Guys, can we mute? Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's good. Along the way, worked for a family office, investing in early stage med tech, spent some time as an emerging technology researcher. So just understanding what the emerging tech landscape looked like. And then, yeah, started a fintech company. Started with my father, actually, been an entrepreneur in the past. And generally it's just, I think, trying to solve the problem of like how to measure and improve how each of us sort of makes an impact on society and the environment. And our thesis, at least, is the biggest way any one person can do that is through their everyday spending. So we built a data platform and a fintech ecosystem on top of that to create incentives for people to make purchases that are aligned with their own personal values. So there's a lot more there about the business, but that's kind of my story.
Great, thanks. And we'll dive into your business model and customers and all that in a bit. Shivani, you have a very interesting story as well. We all, as you know, prepped for this call, and I was amazed with your background and your story. Please go ahead.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This is an amazing organization, and there's so many young first generation, second generation Indian Americans that really look to connect with others. For me, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I have been raised by very passionate technologists. One of which was interested in the open source movement from its origins, and one of which is interested in like hardware, my mom and dad. And I didn't grow up with a doctorate of you need to be doctor, engineer, lawyer, right? Which I'm very thankful for. But I certainly did have a heuristic in my mind that I wanted to do something that was meaningful because I had been raised with a level of privilege, and an understanding that if you are in the United States and you have enough resources, you should try to do something with your life that can help other people and bring something to the world. So I kind of fell in love with art history, and generally what that whole world looks like from trying to understand the past from the lens of imagery. That actually took me into the direction of medicine. So I ended up studying biochemistry and art history in college. And I was on the path towards medical school. I went and lived in India for a year after college. I was working on reconstructive and plastic surgery. I was interested in like what the most creative field of medicine could be. While I was on that path, I realized that my skill sets were probably not in tune with taking tests for 15 years. And at the same time, I had other passions, and I realized that the medical profession is incredible, but it's all consuming, especially surgery. So I got into the Ethereum ecosystem. For people who aren't familiar, Ethereum is an open technology stack, which uses blockchains, which are basically coordination and consensus layers on the open internet. Kind of brings a group of people into a spider web and asks them to talk to each other and transact with each other. I built a project on the Ethereum blockchain that was focused on non-fungible tokens, which are actually images that are tokenized and kind of through a set of cryptographies codified. If those of you are familiar, that was kind of a whole hype cycle, right? Between 2020 and 2022. So I experienced like what an emerging tech hype cycle is like. And I, went through that wave. On the other side of that, I got into investing. A lot of that lens came from, can I take the lessons of having experienced and being early from one emerging tech cycle and apply that to others? So a lot of the work I was doing was trying to understand like, okay, across software, you're going to have these like S curves. Across hardware and wearables, you're going to have these. Now with AI, we're seeing the exact same thing. We have to realize that there was a hype cycle for AI that happened in 2014, in 2015. So the project I'm building now is called Noose Research. It actually started inside of my old company as like an incubating research project. It's focused on open source large language models. The world that we're building towards is effectively a community of engineers, creators, tinkerers who like to build LLMs and need open substrates to do that. It's certainly a small group to begin, but a lot of people actually need large language models that are much smaller and much more like transparent. So yeah, that's my full story up till today.
So you've gone from boring ape NFTs to LLMs. That's quite a journey.
I will defend NFTs in that the art part of it is amazing.
Yeah.
And even like the mimetic, like kind of stupid parts of it, it just reflects that there's a lot of young people who are trying to just like trade with each other, kind of like you would trade with basketball cards in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Last but not least, Sahas, what's your story?
Hey, thanks for having me on. Hey, MR, thanks for hosting. This is my first time being involved with the Indiaspora event, so really appreciate the warm welcome and excited to connect with a lot of folks in this organization in the future. But just a little bit background on myself. My name is Sahas, and I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up, loving computers and tinkering and building my own computers or breaking apart devices to understand how they work. Uh, by the time I got to college, I decided to study computer science at the University of California, Davis. I ended up actually dropping out before my fourth year to try a startup idea. And while that initial idea didn't work out, I eventually stumbled my way into the idea for the company I've been working on today called Smart Car. Smart Car really came about because we realized early on that one of the biggest factors transforming the automotive landscape was software. And we felt that there weren't really anyone out there solving the challenges that developers face to build software that solves problems in the automotive sector. So at Smart Car, we've really focused on providing developers with really great tools so that they can solve a lot of challenges in the automotive sector. The company's now about to reach its 10-year mark in the next few months. We're about a 75-person team. We've raised about 36 million in venture capital, and most of us are headquartered out in the San Francisco Bay Area, but teams spread across the country as well. And ultimately, our hope is that, in the coming years, much like you've all seen the number of apps on your phone grow quickly, or the number of fintech apps that are connected to your bank grow quickly, we're starting to see a large number of consumers adopt all sorts of exciting applications for their car that make their lives easier. And we're excited about all the things that people are building.
Awesome. So we got three very, very different, speakers here. And the common story is none of them became a doctor or an engineer yet, I guess. Maybe, I think Sahas, you said you dropped out. Did you ultimately finish or?
No, I did not.
So officially, I guess we don't have a doctor or engineer on this team here. But so how did I want to talk about being brought up in an Indian American family? How did your parents react to becoming an entrepreneur? Anybody want to take that?
I can
Yeah.
start because my dad was an entrepreneur, I think a handful of times before. And so I had started like a small consulting business, but I wouldn't call that like, it's not a startup or anything. But when I called him to just talk really about this concept, he saw the opportunity and had at the time, as he calls it, semi-retired. So I pulled him out of that and we just got started.
Great. How about you, Shivani?
Yeah, I think a level of confusion on the path that I was on and effectively the pivot that was made, but that really wasn't as important as just like a pretty overwhelming amount of support. Even if they didn't understand like these very abstract ideas of like digital objects with value and open source communities, like they come from like an understanding of the origins of technology. So it's certainly I received nothing but like full support and unconditional like kind of wind behind my back. But my suspicion is this person said she's gonna do this and then went this direction. So maybe a little bit. And I have an older brother who's like a very dogmatic, brilliant man who has followed his calling from age 14. So I think that that dynamic was there. Yeah.
Awesome. And Sahas, how about you? When you told your parents
Yeah,
you're going to drop out, what was their reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, despite growing up in the Silicon Valley, where it's obviously the home to a lot of innovative startups, I think entrepreneurship was quite discouraged at almost every step along the way, and not just at home. I tried starting businesses, building things, selling it online, apps, programs, things like that, even in high school, and it was highly discouraged in the public school, Saratoga High, that I attended. In college, I started multiple different website ideas, app ideas, things of that nature, and it was unfortunately highly discouraged by the computer science department, by advisors, and even just pretty much most friends and people around. So when it came finally to dropping out to start this idea, because I had caught that itch, I think it was something that was quite difficult for my family. My parents were both the first in their families to ever have graduated from college. So the idea that their first next generation would not be potentially graduating from college was, I think, something that was likely very difficult to process. But ultimately, they were very supportive, and it's been I wouldn't say an easy journey, but a tough one, but a very rewarding one.
Awesome. Awesome. So then all three of you guys set up businesses. Let's get into how did you concoct the idea? I mean, it takes a process as an entrepreneur to kind of come up with the idea, because there's so many ideas out there. So Shivani, how I know you went from NFT to Ethereum to NFTs to crypto to now this LLM community. How did you kind of take that journey, and how did you end up?
That's a very good question. I mean, I'll say firstly, I'm surrounded by very brilliant people. I have certain skill sets that when they pair with someone who has more technical skill sets, we can bring out the best in each other. So I will say that I consistently look for people who have expertise that I don't have, right? In terms of like the idea itself, like product market fit in industries that change month to month is very, very difficult. The thing that I try and center in on is the talent, the specific niches and gaps that are kind of unoccupied and unseen, which a lot of times means kind of moving away from the current. So for example, with something like cryptocurrency, a lot of young people will, when I tell them I've worked in that industry, they'll say like, tell me how to make money. Tell me how to do this. Tell me how to trade. And I will tell them, I have never done well with crypto when everyone says it's the right thing to do. I only do well when everyone tells me it's the dumbest, worst possible thing. And that's when you kind of have to get in. So there's a certain level of like condition watching, talent watching. And then the idea part is really like, what do I think has a problem-solving nature to it and a niche that is not touched. I think the principle for me comes down to like the ability to find the area that does not have as much competition and actually resonates with people. Both of these projects I've done, it took me like at least a year and a half to really meander around, discover, continue building, experimenting in order to find something that actually worked with market forces.
And it looks like you also chose a contrarian approach in some sense, like don't go where everybody's going.
Well, kind of not like that, not choosing it because everyone says it's wrong, but realizing that there is a certain level of hive mind around emerging tech where people follow news articles and Twitter being like, okay, this looks hot, this looks hot, this looks hot, right? And you really need to look underneath that in order to do well.
Oh, that's a good one, because as an entrepreneur myself, when I started Indiaspora as a nonprofit, talking to people, and they would all say, there's so many Indian organizations. Why do you need one more
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
kind of paving a path through that to clearly define what you're trying to do, right? So that's hard. That is not easy.
Yeah.
So that's I can relate to that. So Sahas, I know you said you tried different things even in high school, and then even in college you're doing websites. How did you come upon the car idea 10 years ago? I mean, 10 years ago, there were no autonomous cars and none of this stuff. There was some kind of maybe people talking about it, but how did you get into that?
Yeah, great question. I wish I could say I had the foresight to identify this as a really amazing opportunity and to solve, but a lot of it actually was discovered by accident, to be quite honest. I, in 2013 or 14, got a little bit of press where I had become one of the first people to reverse engineer the Tesla Model S and find some vulnerabilities in it. And around that time, I was just trying to build some fun hackathon apps for a car. I never thought about starting an enterprise B2B company, specifically designing developer tools for the automotive industry. And as I built that, fun little application, and actually, it was actually a Google Glass app that lets you use your voice to unlock your car's doors or locate it or start its climate controls. A lot of folks started reaching out saying, "Hey, can you make that work on my BMW? Can you make that work on my Audi or my Mercedes?" And as we started trying to get that kind of an experience to work on other car brands, we started really figuring out that the underlying experience that anyone who wanted to innovate with software in the automotive industry was quite a mountain to climb. And that's part of why a lot of software innovation wasn't happening in the automotive industry. And we took a step back and started to try to understand the automotive industry. And what we learned surprised us. Cars are the second most expensive purchase people make in their lives. Low-income households spend something like 40% of their paycheck on transportation needs. There's often a misconception in this country that transportation or cars are a luxury or a privilege, but it's really a necessity. It's often the only way you can get to school, to the hospital, to a job interview. It's a path to economic opportunity. And not having access to mobility in a safe, clean, easy way restricts people's success. So when we looked at where innovation was happening, we quickly figured out that making a car a few percentage more efficient on a gas car each year, or just making cars bigger and bigger, the hardware was reaching a point of diminishing returns in solving these challenges with inequality around mobility. But what had an opportunity to make a big dent was software. So if software needs to get built to address these inequalities in transportation mobility, the people who build software need tools. So that became our focus. If we provide the shovels and picks to resolve and tear down the barriers to entry, then people could actually innovate in this category. And we've seen a lot of parallels in other industries. Companies in the financial tech industry, like Plaid, have made it easy for developers to go build applications that integrate with banks. Companies in the communications industry, like Twilio, have built really amazing businesses solving integration challenges with telcos. Companies in the payment sector have done that, like Stripe. And all of these have ultimately focused on solving challenges that developers and innovators have when it comes to innovating in that sector. So that really became our focus many years ago. And it's been really exciting to see the types of things that people are building today.
Great. So Kedar, question for you as you created this new company, Karma Wallet, right?
That's right.
How did you conceptualize it? And yours, and you've been through so many other things before that. How did you come upon that, and how did you conceptualize this idea?
I wish I had a really great answer, but I just looked at my credit card app, like my Chase app one day, and was like, I spend all this money all the time. Why do I have no idea like what I'm actually supporting? And so the vision from the start has been to integrate social and environmental responsibility data from some of the top consumer brands into your digital banking experience, whether it's on the transaction line, reporting capabilities, like incentive structures to buy from those companies, social features, a personalized rewards experience. And from the start, I never wanted to build a consumer product because it's hard and annoying. But and so the plan was just to like build a data platform, sell it to banks and credit unions. And the market just wasn't ready yet. So we decided to go like prove our point. So we ran like a handful of experiments along the way to demonstrate that people did want to see this data. They did change their behavior when they saw the data, that brands saw greater loyalty, higher average order values, lifetime value. And so slowly we've been building the evidence. We have now a consumer debit card and sort of it's almost like a use case on top of our platform. And then as we gain traction there, we start to sell to credit unions, banks, payment networks, and that's starting to happen. So, yeah.
So let's get into, everybody can have a great idea, but you need money, right? So you conceptualize the idea, you think this is it. How do you get funding? How do you get dollars? Shivani, so what did you do?
Yeah. It's a very important distinction. Like with this company, idea came together. It took about 6.5 months to get funding together because it's a specific frontier area of large language models where the business opportunities are not clearly defined. There's obviously one giant player that's capturing like 80% of the share. And what I found is you have financial capital, you have cultural capital, you have social capital. And I think entrepreneurs or anyone needs to think about capital in these different ways. You can get money from someone who really doesn't understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and you can go through hell because they will just kind of be on your back about what's going on. And to an extent, as an entrepreneur, then you really aren't dealing with the conditions you want. I don't think people talk about the fact that VC money is borrowed money. You need to pay it back, like at some point, or you need to be okay with the fact that you're going to keep taking it out until you get it to a point. So whatever, I think storytelling, I think recognizing that you need a group of people that is willing to advocate for you so that if an investor calls someone and asks about what's going on, they'll back you up on it. And then I think finding the demand in terms of investor appetite. So if investors are saturated with a specific concept, you probably shouldn't pitch on that concept. That doesn't mean that you lie or you tell anything wrong, but it means you have to be a bit strategic on the way that you package your story, which is then a communication and marketing question. So yeah, I would just honestly say, like, think about financial capital, social capital, and cultural capital, and recognize that you need to go after each, not just the money part. Yeah.
And so how much have you raised for this new venture?
Yeah, I raised 5.2 million in January, and then I raised 11.4 million in June. The company 10x'd in value with revenue that we had between January and June. And that obviously really helps when you have revenue that demonstrates on the back of what you're doing. And yeah, honestly, the first fundraise, 6.5 months. The second one really came together quickly, based on the traction that we have. And I think, for a lot of AI companies, you see these really astronomical valuations and fundraises, and that has to do with the cost of compute. And so for us, because we are like quite efficient and scrappy on the compute side, and one of our competencies is figuring out how to use less compute to do more, we don't have to raise like a crazy amount. And my principle is we should raise what we need in order to be like ready to go and deploy. But raising for the sake of raising, I don't understand it in the Silicon Valley sense. Yeah.
Agreed. Kedar, I know you're a little bit early in the fundraising cycle. What have you done to date, and what do you plan to do?
Good questions. So I think we've raised about $5 or $6 million to date across a handful of angel rounds. Certainly starting the company, we were lucky. I was lucky that my father had sold a couple companies in the past, so we had sort of in-house funds to an extent. Certainly a handful of angels, but the next round, it's kind of interesting, like where the VC market is right now is not doesn't really make a lot of sense for startups outside of AI. And certainly everyone has components of that now. But given what's happened to consumer fintech over the past decade plus, and just how probably nearly every VC has gotten burned in that space, we're sort of looking at two options, I would say. One is vehicles to fund the company with philanthropic capital through essentially large family offices that want to invest in social good for-profit enterprises. And that can give us the funding while also providing strategic alignment with the causes that they're interested in. There's also always sort of like the venture or equity fundraising in the background, you're always working on that. So the next round will be, who knows what people call rounds these days, but like something like a Series A. And that'll help us sort of scale up the consumer product, begin the banking and credit union integrations, run some pilots with some of the payment networks.
Well, I've got an idea for you. Your company should be renamed to AI Karma Wallet. You'll probably get
we could call it Karma Wallet, right? Just
Karma AI Wallet. Yeah, exactly. Change your name. So Sahas, you've taken multiple rounds, but I think the first round you got was from Andreessen Horowitz, A16, one of the premier venture firms in Silicon Valley. Take us through the process of how you approached them and how you got the funding to start.
Yeah, great question. So for a few months prior to raising from Andreessen Horowitz, we had applied to quite a few different incubators that included Y Combinator. There were things like Stanford StartX, Techstars, 500 Startups. And I think in a matter of about 2 months in that same time we applied to all of them, we got rejected from every single one.
Yeah.
So pretty much all the feedback we got was what your idea sounds a little crazy and it's too early, come back later. And we heard there are options like raising from angels, and we pitched a few different folks that we got intros to, but we pretty much got the same reaction there as well. So we thought, hey, this may not be the right time or to raise, or we just don't have the right idea or execution or progress in the business. And at the time, it was largely an idea, to be very fair. But then someone said, hey, you should pitch to VCs. And I didn't know what that was, despite growing up in the Silicon Valley. I had not really known anyone that had raised from a venture fund before. So we just went to Google and typed in what's a VC. And then the next search result was who are the top VCs. Andreessen Horowitz came up on the list. I didn't quite honestly know much about them at the time. We just looked up on LinkedIn and found a few folks. And after finding some mutual connections through some random, or some folks in their organization, they agreed to meet me for 15 minutes. And I went by their offices and walked them
through. By the way, how
yeah.
old were you when you did that?
I was about 25, so almost 10 years ago. So yeah. And I think they, by the end of that meeting, said, hey, this is a nice idea. Why don't you come back when you have something to demo or show? And I said, hey, I have it ready to demo. And what I had done was brought 3 different vehicles to the parking lot of their offices and had a laptop with the hotspot connected and was able to remotely demonstrate starting the cars, turning on the climate controls, flashing the headlights, unlocking the doors, all through code. And they thought I had retrofitted these cars or made a bunch of modifications to them, but it was actually working out of the box on production ready vehicles. And that I think got them excited to say, why don't you come back in next week? And I think we had a total of about 3 meetings, maybe 4 with them, 3 to 4 hours. And we got our term sheet, and we ended up closing a seed round in about, with the money in the bank, in about 45 days. So the process with a firm like theirs was much faster than the experience we had over the past 90 days with pretty much any other angel or incubator that we tried to explore working with.
I guess 2 lessons learned from that. One is don't give up, because I know another company where I think they pitched to 120 venture capital companies, and the 121st was the one who gave them money, right? So that's one lesson. The second, you came fully prepared. I mean, for a 15-minute meeting to bring 3 cars and keep the parking lot, I would say is pretty really good prep, for the meeting, right? Because it may not have gone well and you'll have to take 3 cars home,
Yeah.
So
But no, I'd say it's a little bit of luck.
yeah.
I narrowed down my list. One of the books I read that really helped navigate raising that first round was Venture Deals. I think it's by Fred Wilson, I think. And it provided a lot of guidance. And one of the things it encouraged doing was making a very specific list of a very small number of investors that make the kind of investments in the company that you're in. So rather than rapid firing in a lot of directions, we had a very small list of maybe about 10. And of those 10, around that same time, it came down to maybe 2 VCs. One was A16Z that made its way all the way to the later stages of that fundraise round. So I think by having, even though I don't think we were that disciplined, having a little bit of discipline around process of fundraising helped. And but I'd also say it was a lot of luck involved as well.
Absolutely. Let's move. Now you got money, you've got an idea, you've got money. Now you need a product and revenues, right? So Shivani, you got a product and you have revenues. You said you grew 10x in 6 months. So walk us through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll echo what Sahas said, that it was very accidental. We were working towards, like, in those 6 months of trying to raise money, we had an idea for a product, built it out, got very clear on it, got very crisp on it. Turns out there's 8 competitors when it's time to go to market. So at that point, the posture was, okay, let's not get tied down to what we think we are and experiment and see what the market shows us we are. And what happened then is we built a couple evaluation systems, and we were able to offer them as services to companies that organically were coming to us saying, we like what you're doing on the open source side. Can you do something privately for us? That's what ended up happening. And it was very telling that it came out of left field, because in my mind, that showed that what the business that I thought I was in is not the one I actually was in. And I think being kind of elastic and flexible to that is something to work on, because especially when you're putting so much, like, energy and dedication towards your company, you get very fixed on the idea of what you want it to be. And I think it's a bit of, like, an attitude to say, like, there's some things I'm not going to compromise on, like my principles, but pretty much everything else I need to be willing to work with the market. That was my, like, lesson from that experience. Yeah.
So what is your business model now?
Yeah, I mean, we basically provided, are you all familiar with Hugging Face? It's a leaderboard which kind of ranks what the top large language models are. Those rankings are based on a series of benchmarks. So there's benchmarks for, like, coding, math, reasoning, analytics. We took that evaluation system, packaged it, and paired it with an on-chain mechanism. On-chain meaning instead of people like upvoting and a centralized server that kind of moves it up, there's automatic interactions that happen. Effectively, that created a competition from which developers could earn money for contributing code and watching their model kind of move up in the ranking. Basically, we provided a service to a blockchain company. So I did not enter this company thinking that I would step back into the blockchain side. But turns out like we made something that those companies are looking for. And we effectively provided a service for another business when I was anticipating we would be consumer. That's what ended up happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Kedar, how about you? What is the business model for you now?
Yeah, so the business model is primarily, so we charge a membership fee for our, like having a Karma wallet, which comes with a bunch of things, but primarily it's a debit card that you can put money on and some cool sort of sustainability features and cash back. That being said, the price point and public-facing membership is somewhat just of an anchor price point, because while a consumer could show up and pay for it, we recognize the likelihood of that is pretty low given the competition and just consumer fintech. So we sell B2B. We sell, or we partner with nonprofits, but a growing piece of the business is selling to employers, actually, because increasingly, especially younger generations, want to work for ethical and sustainable companies. Like that's one of their top priorities aside from like making money. But not every company can be a climate or sustainability company. So they're looking for supplementary tools to essentially provide employees with benefits. So they load employee rewards onto our card. It's reloadable, so they don't have to pay fees on gift cards all the time. And then it comes with like a suite or marketplace of sustainable products and services for consumers that can provide like up to $6,000 of value per year. And so it's kind of like an easy win, if you will, pay a little bit per employee. You look good for providing this benefit. They feel good and they save money. And I think to Shivani's point, the end goal has always been very clear to me, but the path there I think is impossible to know. And finding advisors and just champions, even just friends of the company that really get what you're doing and see the path and have the experience in the space to sort of guide you in the right direction has been super valuable. So that's the business model right now. And then in the long run, the model is essentially a razor blade model for our API into financial institutions, where we would charge a program or platform fee annually and then a per transaction cost.
Right.
Basically for data enrichment.
Okay. I'm going to finish up with Sahas now, but then we'll take questions from the audience. So please post them in the chat box and I'll get to them. So Sahas, how do you make money?
Yeah, great question. So SmartCar is an enterprise B2B company. Maybe just to give an idea of the profile for customers, companies like Uber, Lyft, Turo, car dealerships, electric utilities, service centers, a large number. We are a usage-based model. So we charge our customers a fee per car per month. So every time they connect a new car, we charge them a little bit more for it. So it's a pretty straightforward SaaS kind of structure. And ultimately, the value aligns quite well with the number of cars companies typically providing services to.
So what would be an application that an Uber or someone would apply you for?
Yeah, so if any of you've taken a ride in an Uber or a Lyft recently, we just had a press launch with Lyft about 2 weeks ago. One of the big things they're trying to solve is shifting all their vehicles to electric cars. And one of the big challenges they're facing along that journey is the fact that drivers are running into range anxiety issues. You may, MR, order a car from, let's say, San Jose to San Francisco, and that's maybe, 40 miles? But the car you get paired with today may only have 20 miles of range. So that's a big problem. So with our technology, companies like Uber and Lyft are able to wirelessly from the car retrieve that car's real-time battery charge level and range and make sure they only pair you with a car that has enough range to get you to the requested destination. So these types of technologies are enabling better route planning quite easily for ride-hailing companies, which makes that transition to electric vehicles a lot easier. That's just one of the examples of ways they're using our technology, but there's a lot more. And another fun one, if anyone's ever rented a car on Turo and you hit that unlock button in the iOS or Android app, that's our technology that tells a car in front of you to unlock its doors to let you into that vehicle. So there's a lot of really awesome things that companies in the automotive sector have built to make mobility more accessible and affordable to everyone. Not everyone who uses these experiences will know that there are APIs and technologies behind the scenes that enable those experiences. So you probably have used some of our technology in your lives over the last few years, but you may not know our technology may power aspects of it.
So I'm going to take some questions now. There's one for you, Shivani, to kind of go through the three forms of capital that you said: financial, cultural, and social. How do you apply it during the fundraising process?
Yes, I tried to describe it a little in writing. I think, well, first of all, identifying the market segment that you'd like to go after, and most importantly, what is the problem you're trying to solve? There's way too many tech companies who are just making tech for themselves. So, like, what is the problem you want to solve, and what is that market, right? Then I think if you can study a market, which the benefit of the open internet is you can study things. A lot of it for me has been on Twitter and on LinkedIn, on Discord. A lot of the communities that I work with are more in like the gaming crypto industry, which is like much younger. So I need to like understand, how do people think? What moves them? From that, you can actually tell which companies are doing well. And then you can see which investors are behind those companies. And you understand then what is the relationship between the big players and the investors. And then for you trying to enter this market, who would be the most receptive then to what you have to say? And I think then there is a level to this that is you can call it networking, you can call it engineering of people's hearts and minds. You can brand it with whatever you'd like, but ultimately it's about connecting with people and explaining to them what you're trying to do. That part I really think comes before you get the money. Yeah.
Got it. Next question is on patents. What are your views on filing patents? Have you guys gotten patents, or is that important? Sahas?
Sure. We have a couple issued patents, and I do have a few thoughts on it. One, I don't think it's ever been requested or inquired about during the fundraising process, whether that's for a seed or an A or a B. At least Silicon Valley investors have never added much weight to the fact that you may or may not have patents, at least in my experience. I think it's a good thing to have a little bit of effort to track or pursue in a parallel track. And the reason is it provides a lot of a defensive mechanism for startups to protect itself over time. So I would not say that's the most impactful or high priority thing for a very early stage startup to be focusing on. I do not think it will have too much impact on venture capital funding, at least in the Silicon Valley. However, as your business grows, having a strong portfolio that you build upon could be great for defensive measures for anyone that may try to infringe or troll your organization with patents that they may have swooped up specifically for that purpose.
Any other thoughts on patents, Shivani or Kedar?
Yeah, I think we have two patents. They were primarily because we felt like we had a unique concept And when we looked at the patent database, we couldn't find anything like it. And we hadn't built the tech yet, but wanted to protect it because we knew we would build it. So one of them, I think, is around like personalized rewards, essentially. So our platform can enable financial companies to give different people different types of points multipliers based on what they care about and whether they're buying from companies that care about the same things. So you could imagine getting 2x points every time you buy from a women-owned company.
Yeah.
And the other one was like our version of a credit score, almost like a social currency. So figured we'd just have some protection, but we don't really use them, I would say, right now.
Got it.
I'm in the process of doing so. We've built an optimizer that it increases the speed of communication between two GPUs when you're doing pre-training by almost 1000x. And I think a provisional patent or having something like that, I would agree is a smart thing to do. In terms of how it actually helps you win as a company, I think it's not as effective as it used to be in an information era when you should anticipate that there is a level to which you can try and enforce things, but you might be in legal battles for years, and then your market's probably moved pretty heavily. So I think it's really important and necessary, but personally, I haven't seen like it work for helping someone win in the last like couple years. Yeah.
Another question comes on funding environment, or when do you go for funding? How is the funding environment now? You guys have been through some fundraisers. What would it look like in the next 12 months? Any opinions on entrepreneurs who are looking to raise money now or in the next 12 months? Your thoughts? Who wants to- Yeah. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think it depends on the amount, right? What stage are you at? How far are you from something that's real and concrete as an offering versus what's an idea? There is certainly more than enough capital out there that exists. It's just reaching the people, being able to talk to them is a journey that can take time. In terms of like larger market conditions, I think things with the election, it's slightly unstable, I'll say. I think everyone is kind of feeling that. That doesn't mean that people close up their pockets, but I think it means that you need to be willing to give a level of certainty and assurance for people that maybe a year ago would not have been as much of a question, especially in the tech space. That's like my personal feeling. Yeah.
Sahas or Kedar?
Yeah, I mean, I think one place that I like to look are reports from Carta and PitchBook that have a lot of details on the state of the market. The conditions are still well below where things were in the market in 2021, but the activity has, from what I've been reading, picked up for seed and maybe even Series A earlier stage startups. Most funding is still largely biased towards going towards companies in the Silicon Valley as opposed to the Midwest or East Coast or other markets. I think later stage companies are still have even a tighter situation where capital's still even slower over there. But I do think the situation is starting to get a little bit better for early stage companies, but still nowhere near the peak of 2021.
I can't speak probably to the raising from venture firms, but I did work at one, and I worked at a competitor of PitchBook essentially. And so I would present to venture partners, I would present to corporate strategy and innovation teams or corporate venture. And the only thing they ever seem to care about is like what's new and cool, which I think isn't very different from high school or just being a person. And so I would say like I always try to figure out what that community is up in arms about, and then highlight that angle, or like use that as an entry point.
Very interesting question from one of our members. How about, who is someone who has built a business and scaled it up that you see as a good template? I'm avoiding the term role model consciously. So, is there a company? Is there a product? Is there an individual? You kind of say, man, this person has nailed it, grown the company, scaled it, that you would consider a success, looking at these people or companies.
You can go first and just give it like
Sure.
a vague answer. I think all of us were like looking up, because it's hard when you are like, you're building something you feel like is at least somewhat unique. I think there's like business models that have been successful, and there's across a lot of categories. I look at like data enrichment APIs, basically. There's a handful in finance. I know Sahas talked about Plaid. There's a number in like sales automation. So those kinds of products where people just want more data associated with an event, whether that's a transaction or whether that's sales outreach, or that's the one that I think just like makes sense. And there's a company out of Europe that has done this relatively successfully. They're like growth stage, I would say, that does an API for showing the carbon footprint of transactions, and then banks show that to consumers. So feels like this is coming, and we provide more holistic data across the spectrum, respecting that everyone comes from a unique background and context and cares about different things.
Yeah, it certainly makes me think. I mean, I'll just list a few that come to mind. I think the way that Midjourney has been done is, at least in its history up until this point, is incredible. They really were told by pretty much everyone that there was nothing to be made there. There was no place to go. And they did an incredible job of being a first mover in this whole category of like image-based AI. Obviously, that's changing now. Ethereum is something that I've personally bought into a long time ago as like not only like an actual business, but as a philosophical engineering project. And then, obviously in like kind of the popular culture, I do really respect for all of the flaws in conversation. I cannot point to anyone other than someone like Elon Musk, who is just pretty much stuck, like obviously a flawed human being, but has certain principles and certain ways of bringing things to market that there is just no one else that has been able to do. So yeah, I mean, close by, I would say those two in terms of like far-reaching, someone that I think has done an incredible job would probably be him. Yeah.
Sahas?
Yeah, there's so many companies that are, of course, out there, and entrepreneurs who are great role models. One, if I had to narrow down specifically in kind of a developer tooling enterprise kind of category, that I think has been a inspiration or role model, is probably the company Stripe, and the founders like Patrick and John Carlson. I think they've been really amazing executors and operators. And I think, most of the internet runs on their infrastructure for anything related to payments. So, but again, I think people forget today, but it is still started off and continues to be having its roots in developer tooling.
Yeah. Awesome. Boy, we've run out of time. It's been an hour and it's gone by so quickly. I want to ask you guys for some final thoughts. Let's pretend I'm not this age, but let's pretend I'm 21, and I want to become an entrepreneur. What's your advice going to be? What do I do? How do I go about a journey to determine that's good or not?
I would tell my 21-year-old self, like, just do what you think is cool, follow what you find interesting, and I read this really cool quote the other day that was like, nobody chooses to be entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur because you can't do anything else. And so I guess just I would say like do what you find interesting, and then eventually you'll find something that kind of really resonates and just sits with you over time.
Right. Shivani?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've decided that, then you need to be willing to take on the responsibility and hard work that it comes with. And so, I do meet young founders who are honestly dreaming of private jets, and that's pretty much it. And I critique them in the nicest possible way. And I say, like, you cannot get there unless you identify a problem in an area that you're interested in that actually has value to the world in a specific way. So a little bit of tough love, but that's like that's what I would tell them, and certainly encourage them with every possible resource, advice, like pointing them in different directions. But you do have to be a little honest with yourself on the responsibility, the hard work, and fact that it's a shot. It's a shot. It's not guaranteed. Yeah.
Sahas, you have the last word.
Yeah. From my perspective, at least in my case, I don't know whether starting Smart Car happened specifically because I was trying to build a big business or pursue an entrepreneurial pursuit. It genuinely happened by accident, by discovering a problem that I was really curious and excited to solve. And that evolved eventually into going and fundraising and starting a company. So I try to encourage people not just to look at the hype or the trends and focus on, working on something you're excited, passionate, and curious about. And if you do, that is a much stronger signal to find something to build an amazing business around versus trying to find a problem just because you want to be an entrepreneur.
Got it. Got it. I have to let three of you on a secret. I know all three of your parents. So I have to say, I think if I were one of them, I would be super proud of all of you. So on that note, we'll bid goodbye, and thank you, Kedar. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Sahas, for an amazing 1 hour that I think will be viewed by a lot more people once we archive it as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.
It was
Bye.
brilliant. Bye.